Welcome to the 12th edition of the Guru Manthan series, a series of 50 discussions with educationists and thinkers from across the world. And it happens every Saturday. And like I said, this is the 12th edition of it. And it's organized by under the aegis of the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, We Lead. We Lead's mission is to develop human and social capital for the social sector. And it aims to do that by building potential and enhancing the potential of individuals and institutions across this particular sector. And in order to do that, we engage across four broad sectors: the government, NGOs, corporates, and the youth in particular, and the community in general. So this Guru Manthan series is a platform that has been created specifically during these trying times of COVID, and essentially for teachers to uh, share, participate, debate, and learn about the different perspectives from thinkers and educationists from across the globe. We started with Dr. Gururaj Karjagi. We started in August, then we ran through topics such as the role of teachers, and then we also ran through whatever the role of teachers in the sector. Then we had that was followed by September, where we had uh, four more lectures. Can we have the next? Yeah, and what we and subsequently in September we also had uh, other lectures that dealt with Dr. Ananta talked about achieving peace and mainstreaming emotional social learning, and then we had Dr. Kasturi Rangan addressing us during this one, and all of these lectures, and we continue to do that even during the month of October. And as always, this the format of the lecture would be that our guest speaker would speak for about 20 to 25 minutes. That would be followed by a moderated Q&A, which would include questions that both Praveen and I would pick up from the chat box, and also some questions that we already had. And then that will be followed by concluding remarks. Today we have Professor E. Annamalai. I would request Melly, who's and this and the Guru Manthan series is also supported by Asha for Education, who've been consistently supporting this initiative. I request Melly to introduce our speaker for today. Over to you, Melly.
Thank you very much, Ramesh. It's a privilege for me to be able to introduce my father here. So, when I was a little girl and people asked me what my father did, I would say he was a linguist. And the immediate question was, oh, how many languages does he know? And I would explain to them, like my father explained to me, that linguistics is not knowing many languages, it's the study of language. And over the years, I began to understand more and more what that meant. The study of language spans like a wide range of areas. It includes the study of grammar, it includes the study of understanding how children learn languages, it includes understanding the impact of language in politics, society, our culture, and so on. It seeks to explain why some languages become dominant, why some languages die out, why wars are fought over languages, and so on. So I've been always impressed that my father's broad body of work touched upon so many different dimensions of linguistics. His basic training, he started his career in Tamil grammar, then moved to the Central Institute of Indian Languages, where he worked in various areas, including helping develop scripts for tribal languages, pedagogical materials for tribal languages. And he's written extensively about the dominance of majority languages and the linguistic rights of speakers of minority languages. He has consulted with foreign governments in such as Singapore and Hong Kong on teaching, on second language teaching policies. So one thing to also note is his commitment to diversity, diversity of languages, of religions, of cultures. He believes in the coexistence of multiple languages, religions, and cultures, and he's really passed on that to me. I really learned that from him. And as an adult, I became interested really in education and unequal access to education, and I began to understand how central language is to learning. For example, communication is essential when you think of education. Communication between a teacher and a student, communication between a student and a book, communication among students, and without language, all of this is not possible. So as I began doing more and more work in education, I began to have lots of discussions with my father around this. And I'm very happy that he's able to join us today and share some thoughts on that, on all of these topics.
Yeah, thank you, Malay. It is good to know that you have a child who doesn't reject his parents as out of date and belongs to the older generation, not relevant anymore. It's good to have that feeling. My friends and fellow teachers, I'm very happy to be with you today, this evening, and I thank Vivekananda Kendra for this opportunity, and particularly to Praveen and Balu for inviting me to this. I stand before you from a lowliest position in education as one working in the area of language teaching. It's almost like speaking from the kitchen of your house. As you know, in all of the traditional houses, kitchen is the least attended to, smallest, and no light and all that kind of thing. It's the woman's place, right? So men don't pay much attention to that. So even though the utility of kitchen is well known, it doesn't have the respect of the living room or a drawing room in a house, which languages like English gets. So another way of putting it is that in the education, there is a Varna system. And as a language teacher, I would be speaking from the position of a Dalit to the Brahmins of education. But I'm not defensive about my position. I would like to make an argument why language is important. Language has a significant value in education, in spite of the current emphasis on what's called STEM, which is meaningful, whereas language is an unnecessary thing to be learned in school. So there is a view that time spent on learning languages other than English probably would be well spent by learning science and subjects like that. So I want to argue against that view to say that why language is important. The basic reason why language is important is language is both a tool for which the student should get familiar with. I mean, the student should learn how to use that and how it works and all that kind of information. And also it is a tool for use. Something else. So it is a tool as well as it is means to employ it to get, in the case of education, a better understanding of all other subjects. So it is very obvious that you cannot learn anything without language. Right? Animals do learn, but they learn by the reward and punishment method. They learn certain behavior, but without the language, you can never have a critical and creative learning, and also you will not be able to represent the knowledge you have gained and communicate that knowledge to others. So this is a basis for claiming that the crucial role is needed for language in our education system, right? So there are basically two questions which arise from what I said, language as a tool to know and tool to use. The one question is about what languages to be, what what language should be taught in the education system. The second thing is what language or languages should be used as a medium in the education system. I'll briefly share my ideas about these two issues. Right? I mean, language, which is called the mother tongue, is used to understand by the child to know the immediate environment, whether it is relations or emotions or social interactions or biological information. It is through the language the child explores the world before the child comes to school. So the mother tongue plays the first and significant role in knowledge construction before the child even steps into the school. So it makes sense to believe that that strength with which the child comes to school should be made use of. That is, the use of mother tongue to understand the world. Technically, it's called the primary socialization. The biological being becomes a social being. And when it comes to school, the secondary socialization takes place. And it makes some sense that that skill that the child has acquired through the mother tongue should be extended to extended in school. This also would argue that this helps to reduce the distance between the school and home. So it greatly reduces the alienation of the child in the school. So for the first question, what language should be taught in school? The obvious answer is the mother tongue. But mother tongue is not a simple notion. It is understood differently by different people. Let me point out two basic views about mother tongue. One is it's a language to which you socially or culturally identify yourself with. This is an ethnic definition of mother tongue. The other is the language in comparison with other languages you know best. You have the greatest proficiency or competence in that language. So this is another view about the language. The second view is pedagogically more important. That is, it's a tool which you know very well, and therefore it would be better used to explore in the school about the various subjects. The other point about mother tongue is in a multilingual country like India, it's not that one person, one mother tongue. There are many families where the child has more than one mother tongue. In that case, a decision has to be made what mother tongue is used in this in the school. The second thing is that if you look at the new education policy, for example, there is a lack of clarity about their use of the concept mother tongue. If you remember, the policy says mother tongue / home language / regional language would be the medium at the primary stage. I mean, these three are different kinds of animals, right? You cannot opt one option. You cannot make one as an option of the other. I mean, Kannada is a mother tongue in the popular imagination, but it's not the mother tongue as Urdu or Tamil or Tulu or Sholiga in Karnataka. So that mother tongue is different from Kannada as a mother tongue. So there should be clear view about what we mean by the mother tongue in the primary level. Right? The okay. So when you have a class as a teacher with students coming with different mother tongue, this is also true of students coming with different dialects. So you have a situation of how to handle that thing. You see, particularly in villages where you won't have many schools, or in areas where there are multilingual communities. In the same class, you will have students with different linguistic backgrounds. So here, I see that the role of the teacher is well illustrated as a manager of the classroom. I mean, how to manage the linguistic polyphony which the teacher finds in the in the classroom. To give an analogy, it is more like the conductor of a symphony. See how the conductor orchestrates the different instruments and bring to some unison in music. It may not take place on the first day or even the first term. I believe that it's a kind of evolutionary process until the class settles on some kind of common language of communication, which is multilateral, not just unilateral from the teachers to students. So that is thing which the teachers should get trained how to manage the linguistic differences. At least the teacher should have a passive acquaintance of what the linguistic background of the students like. The teacher would know the names of every student and some idea about the family from which the student comes. So similarly, the teacher should know what linguistic background the child comes, so that the teacher would at least be sensitive to these differences and would give opportunity for them to speak out in their own mother tongue. The second question about what language is to be taught is the question of how many. Right? In India, we are settled on 3 languages. It's very old. I think it started from 1949 or something. As a result of a consensus among the chief ministers of all states. You could see the kind of political haggling which took place to arrive at the three languages. So this has been continuing right from that for the past 60, 70 years. But in practice, it's not 3 languages. It would be either 3 + 1 when it comes to students with mother tongue, which is different from the regional language. So for a Sholiga speaking child, or for a Kodagu speaking child, or a Urdu speaking child in Karnataka, it is this mother tongue plus Kannada. And also the policy would prescribe the preference for the child to learn a classical language, which often is Sanskrit, not as much Persian or Arabic. And this also makes it 3+, right? But there is not much thought go into it, how you accommodate the mother tongue and the classical language within the 3 language formula. Also, it is 3-1. Some states like Tamil Nadu opted to have 2 languages, and also some central government organizations like Kendriya Vidyalaya or Sainik School, they also have only 2 languages. There is no place for the language of the local language. So this is the reality of the situation. So it is a challenge how the 3 languages are taught while accommodating the mother tongue and the classical language. I think that's a pedagogical question before the teachers. So what I would like to emphasize is that there are methods to do this, and attention should be paid to that. In NEP, for example, it mentioned the number 3, but doesn't say how these 3 would be coordinated. From a linguistic point of view, I would say that there is something, there's a discipline called language teaching, and but that is not paid any attention in terms of training. If you look at the curriculum of B.Ed colleges, there would be Kannada teaching, English teaching, Hindi teaching training, but not language teaching training. But there are certain generic skills which are common across languages, and so that commonness is not exploited. Right? So if for example, if you learn reading in one language, there are certain parts of the skill could be transferred to other languages. But now they all function in separate islands. The English teacher doesn't know how Kannada teacher teaches reading to her students, and like that. So there is a great room for looking at all the 3 languages as have some common thing from the pedagogical point of view, and that could be exploited for the benefit of learning these languages. The other, I mean, the 3 languages were decided for various reasons. Some of the reasons are political, like national integration, and some are economic, like economic opportunities, etc. But also another important purpose of this is to perpetuate the multilingual ethos of the country. So the school should also make the students get the multilingual experience when they learn the 3 languages, not as 3 separate languages which have nothing to do with each other. So the second point I mentioned before that, another point is that when I say that mother tongue should be, must be a language at the primary stage, purely for the pedagogical point I mentioned, there are also other non-pedagogical reasons for using mother tongue in school, which could be termed like the linguistic human rights of minority speakers, or it could be the desire for a minority linguistic community to develop their language. Right? So all this would mean to have an opportunity for the minority languages in the education system. It is not very different from opportunities in education for weaker communities, right? So the same thing applies to give opportunities for weaker languages in the education system for its development. What it means in terms of practice is that mother tongue do not disappear after the primary school. They after is used as a medium, but there should be an option for the students from linguistic minorities to learn it as a language. It's not only the development of their language, but also it gives certain kind of dignity, that their language is not a liability on them. Every language is an asset, and they could get the feeling that they can continue learning their language and contribute to the development of the language. The last point is the second point is about language as a medium of education. I already mentioned about the significance of using mother tongue as a medium, but for extraneous reasons, not intrinsic to pedagogy, is that the medium has to change. Right. So you cannot have the same medium in a country like India from class 1 to your master's program. So that raises the question of how you work out this transfer from one medium to the other. Right. So there are umpteen number of studies, and also there are models of how this transfer would take place. In India also, Ajit Mohanty, a psychologist, did research in Orissa, and he has recently come out with a book, Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education. So it's mother tongue and other languages. This is a model developed in the context of India that could be looked at. The other aspect of the medium is the use or purpose of the medium. When it comes to English, there is an erroneous view that English is used as a medium to learn English. See, not to learn subjects. Right? So the whole meaning of medium is lost. Right? So it is teaching English as a subject, but by using it as a medium. I mean, there is some truth in the argument that more exposure to a language helps you learn it, helps you get better proficiency. From that point of view, immersion is a good language teaching strategy. But this argument misses certain important research findings in the immersion. One is studies after study point out that the immersion program is successful when the students or the students' families have economic security. Right? There's a famous study in Canada which said that when the French students were immersed in English medium, they did well both in French and English. But when it took some of the native Canadian students, it didn't work that well, and the reason is that the social prestige of the two languages. So the native Indian, native Canadian would consider his or her language as inferior, and that plays a role in the immersion, in the sense that she doesn't learn the mother tongue as well as a French student. And the other point is that in spite of the argued advantage of immersion program, there is a cost to it. I mean, the cost is well known to teachers like you. See, one is that the English medium dissuades students from opting science as a subject at the higher level, and even it discourages them to go to college because that is going into another land, see, with English dominating. And more importantly, it costs the acquiring the knowledge of the other subjects. Right? When you use a tool which you cannot handle, you can imagine how you can spoil the objects which you want to create, right? So this happens in education also. So you neither learn English nor the subject, and that's the cost to that. But whenever, including new education policy, talks about the advantages of English medium, they don't talk about the cost involved in that. So it is necessary to make cost benefit analysis. So this is a big pervasive myth in India, and this is an apology to our failure of not developing a sound methodology for teaching English as a language. Since we have failed in that, we have come to this failing substitute of using English as the medium. And the final point is that using English medium for learning English takes place only in India and other post-colonial countries. People argue that Germany or China or many other countries are shifting to English medium schools or school to English medium tertiary education, but they are not doing it for learning English. They are doing it because it's easier to teach certain specialized subject through English. But it's only in countries like India the medium of English is for teaching English. So this is I would say that new pedagogical discovery of Indian education is, which has been proved false elsewhere. So I will close by saying that the value of language in education is well established, and it's not a debatable one, but we devalue it by with a misguided use of language in our education system. So you'll stop here. I think it's already 30 minutes.
Thank you, sir. We have a flood of questions. We'll try to pick up a few questions. I'll start with one very practical question raised by Shiva. Practice a system called Nalikali.
Okay.
Especially in the grades 1, 2, 3, where it's a playway multi-grade learning.
Yeah.
There, for the teaching the language Kannada, instead of starting with the alphabets A, A, E, E, they start with 5 alphabets Ragasada, Ragasada, and using those 5 alphabets create combinations of words, simple words for the kids to learn, and slowly few more alphabets are introduced, and that's how the complexity of the language is built. Ma'am wants to understand your opinion on this, or is it based on strong scientific evidence, or are there similar models from other places across the world?
Yeah. See, one view is that we don't teach alphabet as such. you teach alphabet in the context of words, right? So introduce letters through words. This is much more significant in a language like English, where there is a vast difference between spelling and the pronunciation of letters. It's not so problematic with our language. Even then, to provide context for alphabet is very significant pedagogically. The second point is that the arrangement of alphabet in our system, like a, I, E, Kacha, like that, is result of it's a result of let's say intellectual understanding of the language, and the grammar has organized the letters in certain phonetic basis, but it is not based on a pedagogical basis. So in pedagogy, you could introduce letters in a different way, the way you just now mentioned, or some people use based on the similarity of shape, because when the child comes to the classroom, the first skill is to control the hand, right? So from drawing to letters, when you come, then you start with letters which have only lines, and then you go to the letters with curves and like that. That would give a pedagogical basis for introducing the alphabet. So you can look at the traditional alphabet as a kind of storehouse, and the letters there don't have to be used as they were organized. I mean, that's a kind of file organization, but in your actual teaching context, you will use what is pedagogically more advantageous.
Thank you, sir. There's one more question from another practitioner. One of our participants, Divya, another teacher, has observed that linguistic learners learn. Question is it associated with their ability to comprehend or understand language, or is it something else?
The first part is learning Russian.
Her
learning language, right?
Yeah, her observation was that linguistic learners are more holistic in their learning. So is it only because of language, or could there be other reasons?
Okay. So we linguists believe that there are some innate abilities in people to learn languages, right? So that plays even more greater role than imitation of what the child had. So, so if that is meant by holistic, I think that is there. It is this holistic in the sense of all languages sharing certain common features, grammatical features, makes learning another language easy, translation between languages easy, etc. Right? And that also would tie up with the point I made that when we teach three languages, we could take them as a one unit and say how you could benefit from others. See, the other point I would like to make from the new education policy is that they make the argument that the child's brain is very plastic. She could learn any number of languages, therefore teach as many languages as possible at the primary school. I mean, that theory is right. I mean, a child is disposed to learn any number of languages until she reaches puberty. But the child learning many languages at a young age is functionally related. I mean, there should be a functional performance for these languages. A child at home might use one language to parents, another language to grandparents, another to the servants, and another to the visitor, etc. Right? But there is a function for each of these things. And the child doesn't just store languages as it would store stones or something like that. So there should be a use for that. So in that, from that point of view, the policy recommendation of NEP is fallacious. You see, you don't just go on collecting languages. You should have functions for putting to use. I don't see any function at the primary level the student will have for 3 or 4 languages. So my preference would be to focus on the mother tongue and get it strengthened, and then move to other languages. And one more point about see, there are individual styles of learning, not only language in others. That also should be taken into account. Some are good at learning by imitation. When somebody says a sentence, he could immediately reproduce that sentence, right? But some don't have, some work analytically, right? They have to told how the sentence is organized, then they will remember that. So there is no one glove fit everybody. So you have to take what's called the learning styles of the students also.
Thank you, sir. There is a question from the chat box, I think, Machama, which is a question that I'll ask. I think the question that is being asked is, often we seem to teach a particular language using another language that we seem to know. But there is also this logic that says that instead of that, teach the language in the very same language that the student is learning. So your thoughts on that? Do we use another language to transliterate something?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all well known that there's not one method to teach a language. What you mentioned, or what the questioner asked, is called a bilingual method. So you teach a language through another language, right? It is perfectly reasonable and pedagogically valid. When you teach English, you could give the explanation in Kannada. For example, it doesn't have to be whole hog, right? The textbook could be in English, and explanations could be in Kannada, and the exam could be in a mixed language, right? So pedagogically, it makes much more sense to have a bilingual method of teaching. But many educationists argue for unilingual teaching. My feeling is that it comes not from any pedagogical principle. It comes from certain ideology about the language. That is, the school should have the purity of language. So if you allow 2 languages in the teaching of one language, it spoils the purity of the language. And the second is tied up with the myth I mentioned, that this is about teaching subject through English. So if you explain teaching physics through English, but with explanations in Kannada, some would argue that it's problematic for learning English, right? Because another language is allowed to interfere with English. So once you don't accept that myth, then it's possible to have a bilingual method in teaching subjects also. So you can imagine how we learn our natural skills. So take a child learning how to walk, right? The child will wobble and fall down, and then in the course of time, it learns the straight walking. I think that language also plays that role. If you insist that you should speak a pure language to learn a subject, then it is a very unnatural way of learning. So you learn by making mistakes, and you learn by making mixing languages, and you learn by using two languages simultaneously. And as we go on, depending on the situation, you see, you would learn the unmixed language.
So on the subject of myths, on
Yeah.
that very subject, there are several myths that go around. For example, one being that STEM subjects do not need language primarily. So that is one. Then also that that there are several parents who believe that a child is only educated. Again, another myth that if he or she can communicate in English, particularly in a particular in one section of the population that says only if the children can speak fluently in English, then they are educated. Or like we said, STEM subjects do not read. And there's another thing that we are also noticing is that there is a significant drop in particularly children from middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class families getting into the humanities stream, particularly media studies or or those kind of streams. Is there something connected to, because their language is a critical component of those streams? So do you see any connection in all of these things, that the myths that are play around?
Yeah, there are multiple points about this question. I would argue that the language is much more pervasive in learning. I wouldn't accept the argument that you don't need language to learn physics or mathematics, right? Even what we call experiential learning, right? Not any formal learning, but you acquire knowledge through experience. But there also language works silently. Right? One cannot imagine how you will codify your experience, how you would organize your experience. It's a language, you see, which plays a role. The same way the mathematics, yeah, there are concepts, but how do you understand the concepts, right? The relationship between the concepts, right? Of course, you could use formulas, you could use logic, but they're also mediated through the language. So for the idea that the language plays no role in certain subject is unacceptable. The language plays a greater role in some subjects, like understanding literature. So you have to know the nuances of the literary language, right? But language is required for learning or acquiring any new knowledge. That is one aspect of the question. The other one, it is the success of learning through English in education. The success has been restricted to the second and third generation learners, right, whose parents went through education and their home environment is different. To extend it that it would be ipso facto successful to first generation learners is a fallacy. right? So we have a sense that what works for middle class would work for the rest of the population. I think that's a very arrogant assumption about the diversity of backgrounds with which children come to education. So I would say that you do have students whose parents do not speak or do not speak a word in English, but they also have to learn English, right? So it is our job as educationists to find ways of teaching English to such children also, right? So we make in language teaching between teaching a language as a first language, teaching a language as a second language, and teaching a language as a foreign language. The difference between teaching a language, second language, and foreign language is that teaching it a second language has home or not home, a reinforcement outside the classroom. Yeah. In the second language situation, the child does not return to the class next day with the same knowledge with which he left the class, because there is a reinforcement outside. Whereas learning foreign language like Chinese in your school, see, there is no such environment. I mean, the student doesn't get anything outside the classroom. It's everything different than that. So the question we had to ask is, when we are teaching English to foreign first generation learners, is it are we teaching it as a second language or as a foreign language or something in between? I think it's something in between, because there's some English in between, but we cannot apply the same techniques of teaching English to middle class children as a second language to the rest of the population. So we had to find ways of I think that's a major failure, finding constructing a methodology for teaching English in the Indian situation. And also we haven't found a methodology of language teaching in the context of quantitatively increased enrollment and school. So almost it is like teaching language in a massive scale. I mean, language teaching is always interactive skill. It's an intensive effort, right? which expects a small classroom for interacting. But now we have a situation where you have a large number of students, and we have to find new ways of teaching language in this kind of situation. So a method of teaching language when there is no outside reinforcement to the student, and also a method of teaching language at the mass level.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. I'm going to club them together.
Yeah.
Language is seen as a unifier or as a means to bring in more inclusivity.
Yeah.
What are your comments on the losing the tribal languages, as well as the whole politics around language being imposed, and language is actually becoming more of a divisive factor than bringing in inclusivity?
Yeah, language, like many other cultural phenomena, both includes and excludes, right? It's how we use it, for what purpose we use the cultural phenomena. So let's say that how we use language in an inclusive fashion, right? So the first thing is don't give value judgments to languages. Right? The tribal language is not useful for the modern period, and English is the language of the future, and that kind of value judgment. As I said in the talk, every language, when given an opportunity, will grow like any other language. Right? So when you talk about the inclusiveness of tribal education, there is also the larger aspect of inclusion in the larger society, right? Larger society in the sense of the economic activities and things like that. So the question is how you balance between the two. That is, one is including keeping the tribal child within the culture or cultural values, within the worldview, and then also be successful in the world outside that thing, right? So that is kind of inclusive when you have multilingual education. That's the basic goal of multilingual education. You don't have to kick out one to get into the other. Right? You could keep your mother tongue, and you could learn a global language. So in the many models of teaching multiple languages, some models specifically focus on reducing the number of languages, right? On the false assumption that one is better than many. Right? One is more efficient, what some economists call scaling up, right? One would go a long distance than many. So that is at the other end. In the other end, you would have a strategy how to maintain the different languages. Right? So the one point about multilingualism is that multilingualism is not a numerical notion that there are many languages. It is basically a functional notion, which is how each language is used for in what context and what purpose. So if you could work out a kind of complementation, functional complementation of languages, then the inclusiveness will follow. I mean, it is a wrong. I mean, it's wrong on the part of education to look at the language teaching aiming at only one thing, that is language which is based on the school grammar. Right? If you look at the multilingual, grassroots multilingualism in the country, the boundaries between the languages are porous. Right? They will move from one to the other very, very easily. Only when you come to school, you learn all this is wrong. Right? You should have impenetrable walls between languages. I mean, that is not multilingualism. See, it is hard to convince education to have this kind of porous relationship between the languages, because the school wants to have uniformity. The school wants to have control, right? So that's why these ideas of grassroots multilingualism would not sell among the educationists. And if you go further, then they would say the school grammar should be the 10th century Kannada, not modern Kannada.
Thank you, sir. One last question, sir, before we move on to your closing remarks. In the private schools, generally the local language teacher, that is in Karnataka, for example, the Kannada teacher is usually the lowest paid teacher. And the highest paid teacher is usually the math teacher or the English teacher. Any ideas on how we could bring in equality among the teach
Right.
the pay scales.
Yeah. See, my view is that even if you increase the pay in private school for language teachers and science teacher, it doesn't bring automatically respect, right? It's primarily a question of respect. The Kannada teacher doesn't have respect as much as an English teacher does. So it's not even a matter of language, right? See, it is. It relates to what I said, the value judgment. To language. To change this, it is a larger cultural and political effort. Let me give an analogy. In the Indian society, the girl child is a liability and the son is an asset. Right? To change that a girl is also is an asset as a son is. You need a major cultural transformation. The same thing is true with languages also. Kannada is a liability, English is an asset. Or Sholiga is a liability, Kannada is an asset, right? I mean, to break that, I think it is beyond beyond the hands of education. We had to have a cultural revolution to bring this change. But the point which education should do is not to contribute to this, even if they cannot change it. Let us not inculcate the feeling of liability to the children coming from minority backgrounds. Right? So at least education could do that, not contributing if they cannot stop it.
Thank you, sir. We'll now proceed to your closing remarks.
Yeah, my remark is just this. See, the one is language teaching is not an easy job, as many people think it is. As difficult as teaching any other subject. That should be realized. It may not be reflected in pay scale or respect scale, but as a profession, it is as challenging as any subject teaching. The second one is we know more about the problems that the questions point out in language teaching, but we are not so sure about the solution. Right? So my view on that is that we have not given thought to this question of how to find solution to language teaching in a multilingual society. Right? When we want to continue multilingual ethos in the country. So once we give serious thought to this, then solutions would come, right? So this again relates to the question is the language is a kitchen business, and we don't talk about that in our drawing rooms, kind of thing, right? So I'm happy to note that you teachers are struggling with questions like this. So I hope that some solution is offered. One thing is to learn from what other countries have done in dealing with multiple languages in education. Some have succeeded, some have failed, and even in India, in some programs have succeeded, some have failed. So we should know what works. There's no one thing which works for all of India. Right? There are many things which are applicable in different places. Right? So let us to look for such solutions. So we will look for solution only when we take language teaching seriously. If we think that it is disposable, then we will never come with any solution.
Thank you, sir. Before I hand over to Dr. Balu for concluding the session. We had two personal questions to ask you, and we couldn't miss the opportunity. One is what took you to the University of Chicago? And the second one, how do you keep going even at your advanced age?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer what took me to Chicago is Millie. The daughters are in the US, so that is one big attraction. The second more serious one is the University of Chicago is my alma mater. I did my linguistics work at the University of Chicago, so it was kind of second home to me. So that made the thing easy. Also, I always had a struggle to give you briefly my biographical history. I started with Tamil in India. Then I started with mathematics in my BA, then went to Tamil at MA level. Then the linguistics was coming into the country. I found it attractive as a combination of mathematics and language. And then I spent my entire career in Mysore working on language problems. And then this was an opportunity in Chicago to go back to Tamil literature, right? So that is another reason why I came to this. And you were, what's the second question?
What keeps you going at this advanced age, sir?
Oh, okay. See, one main reason is teaching. See, when I look at the students in front of me, particularly in University of Chicago, very bright and lively student, and when they ask you questions or when they challenge you, like that, then you are excited, right? So you want to satisfy their curiosity, right? So this, I was fortunate as a teacher to be in interaction with students, and that keeps me going. And the other one is not in my hand. I seem to have been having good health, so right.
Okay. So I think such a wonderful, insightful one, sir. It was very enlightening, and thank you for taking us to this fascinating world of languages. You brought it in so beautifully, the science, the cultural part of it, and I think what 2 or 3 sentences I would love to take back with me are, we shouldn't lose, in the name of uniformity and homogeneity, we shouldn't lose that enormous cultural strength that nations like India have. And the second word, especially for a person like me who swears by grassroots work, is grassroots multilingualism. I thought that is something which is fascinating to learn, and I'm definitely going to explore more about it. And leaving us all with this question, not just us teachers and the entire world of it, the educationists, about how do you teach language in a multilinguistic, multicultural society. I think a lot of food for thought. It was fascinating, sir, and I thank you so much. And I do wish that God gives you a long, healthy life to continue the wonderful work you're doing. And we look forward to seeing you back in Mysore sometime soon. Hopefully after the COVID.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and for this interaction with you teachers, which, as I said, gives me energy.
Thank you so much, sir. And over to Praveen.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. And in the next week, we will be listening to an interesting model of the Kalkari Sangeet Vidyalaya, which teaches music in the first half of the day and actually runs a formal school in the second half of the day. So we will listen to their experiment on what are the lessons they have learned, what are the challenges they have faced. Especially this is very relevant in the context of an art integrated curriculum which is being spoken about in the NEP. And the week after that, we will have Dr. Praveen Kumar talk about education as means to create an equitable society. Do join us next week. Thank you, everyone, and stay safe and see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.